It was a quiet evening in June. A man stood gazing toward the setting sun. On his face hung a weariness and a hopeless longing. His 9 months teaching job was over. The weeks ahead held nothing but emptiness for him. He thought about some work worthy of a person of his training, but there was none. He had visions of spending the summer at a great university to gather new ideas and build up fresh enthusiasm. Then he thought of his bank account. It would barely buy food during the summer for himself, his wife, and his child. Often he has had a yearning to travel, to see the world, but in his 10 years of teaching, he could never accumulate enough money to travel, even in his own country. To him, teaching had seemed fascinating work, but year after year impressed upon him the fact that it was a pauper's profession. He thought of his family and of the sordid future that this hand-to-mouth existence would hold for them. Once more he looked toward the setting sun. Somewhere out there was hope, in industry or in business or elsewhere. That evening in June ended his career as a teacher. The future of our democracy will depend to a large extent upon our nation's schools and teachers. Yet we find ourselves asking, where are the teachers? According to the figures released in 1945 by the United States Office of Education, some 300,000, or 1/3 of the total number of teachers, left the schools during the war years. In 1946, only 1/2 as many students were enrolled in teachers' colleges as in 1920. A meager 6% of the veterans returning to college were enrolled in teacher training institutions last spring. And of that 6%, only a few plan to teach. In the Army and the Navy, these veterans had the comfortable experience of higher incomes. They feel that they can't ask their wives and mothers to go back to the limited means that they had always struggled on. If you ask them whether they intend to resume teaching, they only laugh. Very few high school graduates can be persuaded to make teaching their career. Teachers themselves feel that they can't ask their pupils to follow in this profession because they don't consider it fair to direct the young into such an economic prison. The only advice about teaching they can give to the graduates is that it may be a good depression job. A highly competent person cannot be expected to choose this career if he wants to live comfortably. Teachers with families find that they cannot send their children to college unless they have a private income. In theory, we place education on a high level, yet we are not willing to pay as much for it as for the most menial labor. As a result of these conditions, there has been and still is a serious shortage of teaching personnel. Many classrooms are still vacant. Where no teachers can be found, the pupils are crowded into other classes. Unqualified persons are granted emergency certificates to fill positions that require thorough and specialized training. We might, with equal justification, entrust our health to a laboratory assistant or a drugstore clerk, rather than to a well-trained, competent physician. Last year, over 100,000 substandard certificates were granted to persons inadequately trained for teaching. The state of Michigan gave out over 5,000 such permits. New qualified teachers were simply not to be found. This drain on the lifeblood of our schools is found everywhere. It cripples our educational program from the kindergarten through the college. Not only elementary and secondary schools are crowded, but colleges are in confusion with their abnormally high enrollments. Veterans are still streaming in at their doors. The need for instructors is desperate. Yet many of the teachers who are leaving high school are not interested in college positions, many of which pay even less and have a taste of being temporary. No, they go into industry or business. Even permanent college positions hold no economic lure, as in many cases, the best trained instructors are paupers compared with people in other professions. We find that teaching is no longer a respectable occupation. It lacks social esteem. People may compliment teachers, yet at the same time they pity them. Or else they will justify low salaries, saying the teachers are inefficient and don't deserve more. We are told that too many of them are timid, conservative, afraid to try new methods. But it is their poverty that breeds a fear and a feeling of insecurity. And poverty always destroys self-confidence. We are told that teachers are dreary and monotonous, yet we know that financial worries cast a cloud of dreariness over anyone's life. We are told that teachers are sour and unsociable, but their low income has kept them out of society, out of the circles that radiate cheer and good fellowship. It is only natural that people living in a social and economic prison should acquire the habit of sullen brooding. Some will say, almost enviously, that teachers have the pleasure of long vacations. Vacation is such a polite word, but unemployment is much more accurate. As a simple matter of fact, public school teachers are unemployed, laid off for 1/4 of the year. Their contract expires when school is dismissed in the spring. Their long vacations are vacations without pay. Thousands of them would like to spend their summer layoff in further study or travel, thus widening their horizons and becoming more inspiring leaders of the young. But there is no income, and there is no money for study or travel. It would do little good to replace present staffs with new blood, for the soul-starving salaries offered to teachers soon take the healthy color even out of new blood. What shall we, who like to look at our democratic system of education with pride, do to save our schools? Under our policy of stinginess, nothing can help. Our nation's future in an uncertain world depends upon our political wisdom, our science, our industrial and military strength. Education lies at the core of all these. It would be disastrous to discourage and drive away those who have in their hands the shaping of our citizens' earliest and most fundamental ideas. The millions of children and young people attending our schools are the ones who will suffer most from these conditions. The teachers themselves are a small percentage of the total population. If it is necessary, they can find other occupations. But what about the training of tomorrow's citizens? Must that be neglected? Let us examine our sense of values. Let us compare the present cost of education with the cost of a few non-essential items. We spend as much money for tobacco as for public schools. We spend twice as much for alcoholic beverage. Are those two items worth 3 times as much to a nation as its entire system of public schools? We spend freely and open-handedly for low-grade entertainment, We pour our money liberally into the market of material things. Where is the sense of value in a nation which spends billions and billions for gadgets, but is stingy about training the young to become responsible, self-supporting, and cultured citizens? The school must become a model society where children are inspired to respect law and order. But how can it be such without an adequate teaching force? The school must continue to develop the skills needed by all who live in a civilized nation. But how can the children acquire those skills without competent guidance and help? The school must continue to instill in the young a love of the good and the beautiful. But how can it instill such a love if its teaching staff is economically enslaved until it has neither love nor enthusiasm for anything? Will the American people reconsider and readjust their sense of values? Or will they allow their country to drift into a half-literate barbarism? The Founding Fathers laid down the principle that education shall be forever encouraged. Under that principle, America became a world power. America's greatness, her strength, her security in a world that has unleashed the power of the atom, America's wisdom and sober judgment, America's happiness, her fascination with life and all the wonders of creation. Those things depend upon the efficiency of her schools. Let us place value where value belongs. Let us be more liberal in building up our system of education. Above all, let us encourage those who are working towards mental and spiritual perfection in the citizens of tomorrow.